Everyone right now is obsessed with the same headlines. Bitcoin's next move, Ethereum's next upgrade, the latest meme coin that supposedly did 100x overnight. You open your feed, scroll X, jump on YouTube, and it's always the same questions. Where is Bitcoin going? Which altcoin is the next 100x? How much money went into ETFs today? But behind all that noise, one chart is strangely quiet, XRP. And that silence raises a simple but very important question. Does this mean the story is finally over? Or are we actually sitting in the calm before a much bigger move? In this video, we're going to look at XRP from several angles at once: social interest, market behavior, Ripple's institutional story, regulation, macro conditions, and investor psychology. By the end, the goal is to have a clearer answer to this question. Is XRP quietly setting up for something big, or is this just another long-running hope narrative? Let's start with a basic rule of crypto that people forget every cycle. The biggest moves almost never start when everyone is staring at the chart. They usually begin after long, boring periods where it feels like nothing is happening. Price moves in a tight range. Volatility dries up, traders get bored and move on. You start hearing, "Is this coin dead?" more and more often. Meanwhile, under the surface, the market can be doing something completely different. Patient players quietly accumulate. Long-term investors rebuild positions. Sometimes large players use boredom and low volatility to absorb supply without drawing attention. From the outside, it looks dull. No new highs, no huge pumps, no viral screenshots. But if you've watched enough cycles, you know this pattern. Powerful moves often start from these "nobody cares anymore" phases. Right now, XRP looks a lot like one of those phases. Compared to many loud altcoins, XRP looks calm. Price action is more controlled. Volatility is clearly lower than in the past. For short-term traders, that's boring. For long-term investors, it can be a classic accumulation environment. To see whether that's the case, let's first look at social interest. For years, XRP has been one of the most debated projects in crypto. The SEC lawsuit, Ripple's work with banks, cross-border payments, ISO 20022, CBDCs. People loved it or hated it, but they rarely ignored it. Today, your timeline is probably filled with meme tokens and new narratives instead of XRP threads. The hype spotlight has moved. But when you look at actual engagement, you see something interesting. XRP videos still pull solid views. Analysis content with XRP in the title still performs well compared to many coins of similar size. People see an XRP thumbnail and still think, "Okay, what's going on?" That tells us something important. A dead project loses its community first. Views collapse, comments disappear, and nobody cares when a new video drops. With XRP, that hasn't happened. The conversation is quieter, but the audience is still there. The story, at least in people's minds, is not fully closed. Now let's zoom in on price and behavior. In previous cycles, XRP was famous for wild volatility. Huge daily candles, sudden spikes, brutal crashes. Traders loved it, investors hated it. Today, behavior is very different. Compared with many high-beta altcoins, XRP moves in a more stable way. Volatility has dropped, and price spends more time in defined ranges. That can mean a few things. Panic selling has cooled down. The weakest hands may already be out. Buyers and sellers are closer to balance, so price only breaks the range when a real catalyst appears. You can read that as "nobody cares," but you can also read it as "stronger hands are in control," especially if it lines up with other data. To understand the bigger picture, we have to talk about what makes XRP different from most altcoins. XRP is not just a token. It sits inside a much larger story built around Ripple, a company that wants a role inside the real financial system. Ripple talks to banks, payment companies, and financial institutions. They work on cross-border settlement, instant transfers, liquidity bridges, and payment corridors. They experiment with stablecoins, tokenized assets, and CBDC infrastructure. Institutional players don't tweet XRP to the moon. They care about licensing, regulation, uptime, integration, and risk. So you might not see fireworks on the chart every week, but that doesn't mean nothing is happening. The real question is simple. Will this network actually secure a role in global payment and settlement, or not? If the medium-term answer is yes, even at a small scale, then today's quiet period looks less like a funeral and more like construction work. Now, let's bring in regulation and the SEC saga. For years, the lawsuit was a huge cloud over XRP. Funds and institutions said, "We're not touching this until the legal situation is clear." Some exchanges delisted it. Endless debates about whether XRP was a security kept risk high today. The picture is not perfect, but it's much clearer than before. A big chunk of the uncertainty has been removed. Markets care a lot about that. They hate uncertainty and they price it with a discount. When the rules become clearer, that discount can slowly shrink. And once institutions feel they understand the boundaries, they can start to participate again. For XRP, that shift matters. In the short term, the chart can still look sleepy. But from a structural perspective, a cleaner regulatory backdrop is a major change compared with 5 years ago. Now, none of this means XRP is guaranteed to explode. There are still serious risks. First, the macro environment. If global liquidity stays tight, if the Fed holds rates higher for longer, if risk appetite in traditional markets is weak, then most altcoins, including XRP, will struggle to sustain big rallies. Second, real usage narratives are cheap. On-chain activity is harder to fake. Are payment flows actually growing? Is XRP being used more as a liquidity bridge? Are real institutions settling more value over these rails, or is most of the interest still speculative? Third, investor psychology. XRP has one of the largest groups of long-term bag holders in the market. Many people have been holding since 2017 or 2020. They've sat through multiple cycles of hype and disappointment. That means if price finally reaches certain levels, a lot of them may say, "I'm done. I'm selling." That creates heavy supply in the first waves of any rally, which can slow the move and frustrate new buyers. So where does all of this leave us? On one side, we have a quieter chart, reduced volatility, and less hype on the timeline. On the other side, we still have a strong community, an active institutional story through Ripple, a regulatory picture that is far clearer than it used to be, and content performance that shows people are still paying attention. To me, that combination says one thing: the XRP chapter is not fully written yet. We don't know whether the next pages will be slow, steady progress, or a sudden aggressive move. But I don't think this silence is empty. It looks more like a phase where something might be quietly building in the background. And in markets like this, those are exactly the phases you don't want to ignore. Now I want to hear from you. How do you read XRP's silence? Is this an accumulation zone before a bigger move? Or is it the slow fade out of an old story? Share your view in the comments. And if you like calm, data-driven breakdowns on XRP and the broader crypto market, make sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel so you don't miss the next episode. See you in the next one.